Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the Disability Ministry Video Roundtable for the month of October. And today we're going to be talking about the transition cliff and what role our churches should be playing. I am Beth Golick from Key Ministry, and my colleague Catherine Boyle, who's our Director of Mental Health Ministry, is waving. And we're just really excited about this discussion. I mentioned before we hit record, this is not a webinar. I am not coming to you to present information. We are coming to facilitate a discussion. We want to hear what your experiences are, either as perhaps a parent or a caregiver for a loved one with a disability who maybe is about to reach the transition cliff or is already there. Or maybe your church is involved in some kind of innovative partnership. So I want to just open it up. And again, this is being recorded. And so people, ministry leaders, families, people who are very involved with this, maybe this is a new topic, will be listening to this down the road. So maybe we can start. Does anybody want to talk a little bit about the transition cliff and what we mean by that term? Anybody want to start with that? I know we have some experts on this call. Anyone?
Well, I'm in the middle of falling off of it.
Okay.
So,
Let's hear from you, Lisa.
Really, it's just a transition between pediatric level of care and adult care, pediatric services and adult services, this high school into adult life and employment and housing and all of that stuff. And, for me doing what I do, I have probably more resources in this area than anybody else does, and more connections and more networks. And still, part of it was attributable to, COVID shutting the world down right as she graduated. But we're in the middle of that situation right now. And while we do have waiver services and some other things that would hire people to do some of the things that need to be done, being able to find that employment, being able to find services that will show up has been a challenge. The whole healthcare transition, because she has so many different diagnoses, and we've gone through about a year of not quite as stable as we have been in preceding years. And so right at the time where we needed the group of people that has known us all of our life, we're having to find new people. And so there's a lot of pieces and parts to it. I mean, down to having to change and find new suppliers for wheelchairs. So that's what's going on in our world. And we're hanging on to the edge of the cliff with our fingernails and doing a lot of praying and a lot of researching and a lot of creating resources of our own. And the director of our disability ministry here at church is in the very same boat. Her son with Down syndrome, which is a whole different set of challenges, some similar, but some are different. She's facing the exact same situation, and once her child aged out of the school system, suddenly she had to quit her job and stay home because there was not employment opportunities, there are not some of these things. So that has actually become a really big focus of what I am doing, both through Lifeline and my church ministry. We are working on coming up with a solution for that and looking for ways to access maybe some community funding in order to provide options for families, even if it's not year-round 24/7 kind of options, at least periodic options that will give families support in keep them from falling off the cliff quite so quickly, or maybe stop them on the way down.
Right. There's so many visuals there, right? So thank you, Lisa, for your perspective. So Lisa's here not only as a ministry leader with her organization Lifeline, but also clearly, has involvement with the church disability ministry, and as a parent caregiver as well. So great perspective. So basically, we're talking about, what happens when a child with disabilities ages out of childhood. And I think it varies a little bit by state, I'm pretty sure. But suddenly you lose access to a lot of the services. And, there's a concern for the future. COVID certainly has played an extremely interesting role in all of this, as we all know. And definitely the actual staffing issue of, there may be services theoretically available with no one to staff them. So huge issues. And so I'd like to open it up to anybody else who would like to share maybe what's going on in their neck of the woods, or maybe perhaps how their church has addressed this issue.
I have a slightly different tack, and I don't know how helpful this is to the group at large. I'm part of a fledgling disability ministry committee at my church. I have a son in his late 30s with developmental disabilities. But I was just recently tapped by somebody else on the committee. Can you talk to this mom of a family that's relatively new? Because they moved to our area in the last few years, and the mom is asking questions to understand the local scene for employment issues. Like I said, my son's in his late 30s. He has a warehouse job. So for one of the topics that probably relates to churches supporting those families with young adults with disabilities is very often, once anybody hits that high school, almost high school, the almost done with high school age, people kind of lose track of how old they are. And the one thing we certainly saw was high school ministry was welcoming in the sense of the doors open, come on in. But once high school was done and the transition program was rolling, it was challenging to find where to fit in within the congregation. To just touch base with those families as those kids are in high school. How old is Billy? How old is Susie? And to ask questions and to be a listening ear for a lot of folks with children in that age range. They're thinking about employable, not employable, at home or in a community setting on day programs. I'm in Illinois, and boy, residential is pretty much non-existent here. So a lot of these folks are living with their parents. My son's still living with us. Mm-hmm. And also thinking about guardianship issues. Mm-hmm. You don't have to totally understand it to be a listening ear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing, Gail. So Doc, I see your hands up, but let me just piggyback on what Gail said there. So yeah, so we're talking employment, we're talking residential, we're talking, community, we're talking being part of a Christian community, being part of the church. So there's a lot of kind of unknowns and a lot of ways that perhaps our churches might be able to play a role, whether it's hosting info sessions, we're gathering, what does exist and helping families tap into that. And maybe it's even more of a role. Maybe churches are partnering to do residential. That I'd love to hear some more about that, because that's something I think locally there's starting to be some, yeah, Gail.
I know of an example because I know some of the people involved. Parents related to the Stars Ministry at College Church in Wheaton, which is kind of like the grandfather of Disability Ministry in Chicago Metro, now are running 3 residential situations.
Okay.
3 homes. Anybody interested, I can get you in touch with the people doing that thing.
Okay. Yeah, there are a couple really fantastic examples. I did not know about that one, but there are some like across the country that are definitely on our radar. Thank you, Doc.
Yeah, so thanks. I agree completely with everything that's already been said. One of the first things I'll say, and let's go ahead and just address, is first, let's deal with the church and remind everyone that we, as our role in the church and as a disability ministry, we need to make sure that no one should ever age out of our ministry. So we need to especially be aware of that, as you know, our individuals are going from high school into that adult age, that we actually have something for adults, that we just don't throw them into the adult worship and say, there you go, you're on your own, that we're able to provide things for them. If they're able to be in the adult service, great, but many of them aren't able to. Other things, many cities and states have extended school programs, and 18 to 21, 18 to 24, depending on your city, state. And so, what we've done in ours, and I've helped other churches with, frequently the youth groups will extend their youth group. As long as the student is still at the high school, they can still participate. And so that's a good way that they can still be there. But one thing that we have found that's a huge need, is once they're done with high school, and we've called it this cliff because they lose all kinds of services. But one of the biggest things they lose is their community. They no longer have their friendship from school. All their friends have now gone off to college, and they're not seeing them all the time, and it's not if they're lucky enough and blessed enough to actually have work, they go to work, but no one talks to them because they're just different enough, or they're afraid of that. So they are desperate for community. So one thing that you can do is, it's what we're doing on a monthly basis. We've created Source Social Clubs, which we do it the second Tuesday of every month. It's 2.5 hours. And for us, it's 18-year-olds and older. And for this, we focus for our higher functioning individuals, where we have dinner together, and then we create friendships. A lot of times they don't even know how to create friendships. So we're able to sit there and help create friendships. We have dinner, we play games, we watch movies, we sing karaoke, we do dance parties, and just have fun. And that has been absolutely huge. That's a very low-hanging fruit that a lot of churches can do. And honestly, it doesn't have to charge you anything. The families are more than happy to pay for that, to give them that entertainment. We charge $20, and that covers our food for the event. We'll have about 25 participants. And then honestly, I only need to have about 3, maybe 4 volunteers there. So it's not a lot of work to get those planned and put together with it. That's a real easy, low-hanging fruit. Other churches do take it a whole step further, and maybe even have day service programs where they actually have work services. And there's a great church and ministry here in the greater Kansas City area, Church of the Resurrection, Matthew's ministry. They have the Sunflower Bakery, where individuals with disabilities have their day program, and then they bake cookies and muffins and sell them throughout the city, and they're fabulous. And so that's something that people can do sometime, and different things with that. And so those are great, but that takes a whole nother level of commitment, a lot of extra expense, depends on laws in every state and things to do. And it's not right for everybody, but you got to see what's right there for you. Definitely agree with Gail. There's several that do the housing. Again, that depends on every single state and city with different laws with that. But you don't necessarily have to provide or help with the housing. But if maybe you just put out your tentacles and try to learn what is even available in your community. Ways we can help our families is just creating, parent sessions where we can just have little talks for them, where we can bring in someone, talk and even preparing for this transition, talk on guardianship, talk on conservatorship. What's the difference between the two? And it is so vital and so very important. One quick example of that, we had in our ministry a 20-year-old who the parents just had said they did not feel they needed to get guardianship for him because it was so expensive. Well, he ended up getting in a car accident with some friends and was transported to the hospital. He's also nonverbal autistic. Parents find out, go to the hospital. They're not allowed to see him. They're not allowed to talk for him or do anything for him because he is, in the eyes of the medical world, considered an adult. And they couldn't do anything. It took 2 days to get court orders for them to do something. And so if they would have been able to go and hear talks and how important just stories like that could prevent that something. And then even having talks on, maybe bring in the different housing authorities that you've got or group homes that you got to talk through things. Bring in maybe some of the groups that talk on job recruitment and job training skills and the different things that are out there. Really talk through all the differences with that. Look for things outside of just vocational rehab. Vocational rehab really is not the best thing for our families because it's great for the employer because the employer is making the money and the training group makes the money, but it doesn't really help the participant because they're not fully being trained and they're not training the employer. And what we're finding, especially in our area, is it's a checkbox system. Once they get everything done, everyone gets paid, and then they're not eligible to go through the program again. And many of our families have made it long enough and through enough where their kids are getting fired or laid off because things aren't working or they don't have the skills they need to succeed. And now they're not eligible for more things. So it's trying to find other things to help give them all that training that they need to really know how to work with a job. It may be learning how to help train employers on how to talk with someone with autism. That's something that churches can do. Teach not just the employer, but all the way down from senior management, all the way down to entry-level employee, how you talk with an individual with a disability, how you interact with them, because the entire workforce needs to do it. So those are all things that you can do as a church that won't take a lot of money to do, but would be super huge beneficial. But for me, the lowest hanging fruit would be those social clubs that you can get out and really make a quick difference.
Yeah, so thank you for those examples. So I'm hearing through, our different ideas here, I'm hearing kind of some different levels of how our churches can be involved. So I think like probably the easiest or what would take the fewest staff hours, if you will, would be having like some info sessions where you're inviting experts in and connecting families with existing resources. And then I see hosting events that are basically like to give individuals that community that has basically fallen away once they leave their high school environment. And so I know that can be done either by bringing outside groups in. My church just brought in a game cafe company, if you will, that they're going to be in a physical space soon, but they don't have their physical space yet. So they came in and did a pop-up event at our church, and it was fantastic. So they brought in the games. We just helped get the word out, and it was on the news, so you can go watch the video, but it was really fun. But again, you can do all different kinds of kind of just community gathering events, social events. And then obviously you can go way bigger than that and partner with like residential employment opportunities. Hang on, I'm gonna need to look at the chat because there's stuff going on. Okay, let me just turn to the chat for a second, because so people that are watching this recording later do not get the benefit of reading the chat. So that's also, I have to read it out loud. Gail is saying, +1 to Doc mentioning Disability Ministry as a way for families to learn resources which school districts previously provided. Regarding employment, many folks with IDD would benefit from practicing their interview skills, which could be done with adult church friends. That's a really good idea. Yeah, there's all kinds of just life skills that we could do together. Okay, love it, Diane, thank you. She says, this is wild. I was just brainstorming about this after attending a conference regarding the adult ASD housing crisis. As parents are building their own ARFs, I don't know what ARF is. Anybody know? Okay, to address the served lack of housing options, for example, designate one on-site house building as the ARF group home for our residents, who in turn provide staffing for the retreat center's operations. Example, dining hall, food service, thank you, adult residential facilities, thank you. Example, dining hall, food service, maintenance, stocking, etc., which are already the most common vocational training they receive in post-secondary programs. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think there's so much potential here. Ellen, wait, I see you way back there.
Yeah, sorry, we have this new screen that we're looking at. This is just more to the community, kind of recreating that village that, you know, a lot of our kids have through school, through church, which hopefully church isn't going anywhere. But really similar to what Doc was saying, is Befriend is a model through 99 Balloons that's much like, you know, a respite model that they call recess, or what Nathaniel's Hope has, Buddy Break. But this is Befriend, and it's for adults, and it's really a plug and play, and it gives you the model. It even gives training, back-end support, technology that you could have a login to go on and learn exactly how to run a Befriend event. To also, if you have volunteers who are new to disability, there's some great training on there. So I just want to mention that. We're launching a couple here in Jacksonville, and there is a partnership from Young Life Capernaum. Their groups and their clubs transition straight from there into Befriend is what we're hoping to see, you know, more and more around globally and domestically. But just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Ellen. I'm so glad you said that, because I made a note when somebody was talking earlier. I wanted to ask, is anybody here on this call from Young Life Capernaum or from 99 Balloons? Because I wanted to mention that Young Life Capernaum's age parameters, I think, are a little like, it's not quite cut off at high school. So they've expanded a little bit. But then at some point, individuals do age out of that. And so, yes, I wanted to mention Befriend, which is this program that Ellen was just talking about. So we will make sure to put in the show notes, we'll put the links so that people can check out Befriend from 99 Balloons. Okay, Corey, you've got your hand raised, and then I'll go back to the chat.
So I just wanted to make a comment about school districts. I currently work for a school district in Texas, and one of the things and I work in the special education department, and one of the things that we are required to do every annual review for every kiddo once they're in 8th grade or higher is work on transition goals and transition planning for what life is going to look like after high school. And so normally there is a transition specialist for every local district. And those people have already created the wheel for resources in the community. They're not faith-based, but they know where all the community homes are. They are the one-stop shop for what is locally available. And they would be an amazing person to ask and to connect, just to get you an idea of where you could start supporting, how you could start referring families, or who you could reach out to. because they already have that stuff laid out as part of what our school district requirements are. I know that in Texas, it looks a little bit different than in other states, but the transition piece is part of our requirements. And I know that, so like I saw someone say that not everybody has a transition coordinator, but I also know that they are required, like it's a requirement for districts to have resources. So they may not have someone that's actually like called a coordinator, but there's someone at every school district that has that role and they'd be able to help.
Okay, great info. Thank you. So, you know, here's an assignment. Those of you who are in church ministries, maybe reach out and try to figure out if your district or the districts that, you know, are represented in your church geographic area have district coordinators. You make that connection, start that relationship. Yes, and you may find out that your school district doesn't have one, but there might be, you know, the resources or some other contact that you can make. I love that. Thank you. I'm going to head over to the chat because it's blowing up over here. So, okay, so back to, we were talking about the adult residential facilities. Same goes for partnering with local regional centers to create more adult day programs at local churches, disability ministries during the week. For example, administration, clerical facilities, etc. So yeah, so there are ways that your church can work with existing like employment centers. I think that's where we're going with this. So that's cool. Thank you for sharing that. A different area that churches can do is invite local agencies to a church hosted job fair. Staff at the local providing agencies benefit all people in the region as they seek services. Yes, I'm a huge proponent for any time we can open up our like physical church buildings to bring the community in for whatever it is. And, you know, the idea of doing a job fair, I mean, that's bringing people in, making connections. I think we need to do more of that. I'm just saying. Okay. Lisa, we created a summer camp for young adults that incorporated everything from hygiene discussions to employment preparation, to social activity, to interaction with first responders. Oh, that's a good one. To spiritual discussions, taking responsibility, cooking, et cetera, et cetera. We did things both at the church and in the community. Our plans for this coming year is to make it more than 1 week and eventually expand the curriculum to a whole summer and beyond. That is so cool. I'm seeing jaws drop at this one, Lisa. Yeah, applause. That's really great. Are you bringing people in, or are you creating this in-house? I'm curious.
A little bit of both.
Okay.
We did, one of the other things I didn't mention was actually bringing in a counselor and talking to them about communication strategies as well. So we did bring in some resources, but we also had a special education teacher who was involved in the development of it. We had an RN who was part of the development of it. I was part of the development of it. And we had, because we did it during the summer, we pulled in some parapros from the school system who actually knew some of the kids. And we didn't open it up publicly the first year because we had just moved our church twice in 2 years and we've worn everybody out. But we were just beginning to use this new space that we have. So we didn't have a whole lot of time to plan. And so what we did is decided that we were going to do it for 1 week, and we decided that we would do it with a number of kids or young adults that we already were connected to and already serving in some way as kind of our pilot project. And so we had anywhere from 12 to 15. We kind of we knew what our staffing was, and we set our cap at 15. And then we helped the families actually apply for family support funding for respite. And that is part of the funding that we use. Some families private paid, and we scholarshiped a couple of them because of their family circumstances. They didn't qualify for family support or whatever, and their families didn't have the funding. So we kind of had to cobble together the funding for it. But we actually came out pretty well financially square at the end of the week. But we had, in some cases, the meals during the day were cooked by them. In some cases, they were brought in by or provided by somebody in the community. And one day we actually took them to a restaurant and did the midday meal that way. So we incorporated a lot of different experiences all in the same week.
Wow, that's incredible. Do you have, like, is this information anywhere on your website that people could check it out?
It's not, we're too busy doing it. No, but we are. I mean, this is actually just a piece of a curriculum that another mom and I have developed through the years. I mean, we literally have a plan roughly laid out that would do probably 6 months worth of stuff. It's just sitting down and actually laying out who's going to do what, when, where, and now that we actually have the space to do it, how are we going to fund it and things like that. So yes, it exists, but no, it doesn't. It exists in our head. It exists in a bunch of notebooks and papers and notes in a lot of places. We are in the process, though, of pulling it all together and making it a more definitive, I don't know, program, I guess. As we now know what space we're working with, we now know where God has settled this church and what resources we have here, as a lot of things are beginning to happen or start back up after COVID. We now have resources that will come in and share with families, which they wouldn't for a period of time. So yeah, it's a work in progress.
Yeah, well, we're already getting requests for you to teach us more on a different roundtable. So
I'll be happy to.
later after you get it. Also going on in the chat, back to housing for a second. How about partnering with seminaries and Christian colleges too? Like Western Seminary already has an adult home modeled after L'Arche, which I think is fantastic. And there's probably some good examples out there. I mean, I won't try to get, I think I know some, but Molly, let's hear from you.
Hi, sorry, I had to find the mute button. My name's Molly Mack. I have a son who's 21 and in his last year at our school. So we literally are on this at the cliff, if you want to call it that. I was just on a Zoom this morning earlier with a different group. And one thing that I was able to share that I think might apply here is I got a piece of advice when Daniel was maybe around 14 or 15. He has autism, by the way. Was the power of volunteer work within your community. And they talk a lot about, don't wait till the cliff to start making those connections. So although we're talking about the cliff, which tends to be, 18, 19, 21-year-olds, whatever. I feel fortunate. I was given that advice when he was 14 or 15. And in our town, we have a kitchen that serves food to people that are fighting cancer, called the Village Project. And he started volunteering there. And it expanded his connections within our community. But not only that, it expanded some work skills, social skills, communication skills. So from a parent perspective, one thought I have, and I like what Doc said about low-hanging fruit. One thing that might be neat from a church perspective is you already have a band of volunteers, like whether they're the greeters at the front door or the people that make the coffee or that list I'm sure is endless depending on the church size. But could you ever coordinate with and just pick some volunteer positions wouldn't be appropriate, maybe teaching a class but if somebody was a greeter at the door, could they have a shadow? Could they have one of the special needs kids just shadow and say, help me be a greeter, or help me do the coffee, or help me refill the donuts? It would be a work skill. It would be a social bonding with that volunteer. And it also would be expanding this person's connections and make them not feel so invisible. Sometimes we feel invisible with our kids. I think that just would be something that wouldn't take more time if it was the right fit. You'd have to get the right volunteer person, the right volunteer job, and the right child or student, young adult. But it's just a thought that you can kind of piggyback off of something that already exists. So just an idea.
I love that. It's a really good thought. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for bringing that up. And plus, serving in our churches, like that's a really important part of the discipleship process and our own personal journey. And if we are denying people that opportunity to serve, like shame on us, because that's really part of being in a Christian community, is that opportunity to use your gifts to serve. So yeah, and I think you came up with some really good examples of serving, volunteering. Yeah, so thank you for that. I'm gonna go back over to the chat for a second. Yeah, volunteering can get you a good job reference in the future. That's true as well. Lisa shares that we've also done Transition Academy, which is a day-long event that incorporates bringing together all of the transition resources for the community, local and state and federal, for families to be able to come in and meet them, sign up on the spot, etc. Also, we have done this in coordination with a conference type setting, with options for people to sit in on some of the resources, giving talks about their services and eligibility and how to apply. Our largest event had 39 resource representations, and almost 300 attendees, including parents, teachers, and high school students with IEPs and 504 plans. We did this for years, and then the local school systems began doing it within their own systems, since we are right on the border of 2 states. Okay, so that's a great resource. Thank you for sharing that. Who else has? So I'll raise one. So I feel like local, like in my neck of the woods, there's several people have come to me lately wanting to get some, like their kids are reaching that transition cliff and they're looking ahead to the future, and they are looking at starting a residential initiative. Does anybody want to speak into that? Like, do any of you have anything like that that's come out of your church or grown from people in your church? Does my question even make sense? Makes sense. Okay.
It's actually something that's on our radar and that we are anticipating now that our church has finally landed at a space that's big enough to do some of the things that we've had dreams of doing for a while. We're actually in the process of purchasing some land that is next to the land we currently have. And our goal is to put an assisted living facility in there. The assisted living facility would also be temporary and possibly permanent housing for some young adults with disabilities. Our goal really is transitional housing for those aging out of the foster system, and also those who are needing a little bit of supervision before they move completely out on their own. And they would also have employment opportunities within that assisted living facility. And our plan is to put a school next to it. So the idea being that it's multiple generations all together on site, and then that offers so many opportunities, from social to housing to just employment, everything kind of in one place. but then give that a jumping off place where then they look for their own housing. They establish their own funding streams that may give them the ability to live on their own and things like that. So it's still in the idea phase at this point, but it is something that we've talked about, putting tiny houses back there. I mean, we've talked about a lot of different opportunities to make transitional housing, knowing that at the end of the day, there may be a handful of them that may need to stay longer than others, but to be able to at least give them a start.
Okay. Lida, then Gail.
Hi, I'm Lida. I work for Heritage Christian Services. We're based in Rochester and Buffalo, New York. And we were started by parents from a church. It was 40 years ago, actually 43 years ago. They started meeting for 3 years and then opened the first home 40 years ago. Well, 39, it'll be 40 next year. Every state is really different in the regulations, and in New York State, I would recommend that anybody who is seeking to build or have something to do with developmental disability services should check with your state and make sure that they will allow this to happen. I know I talked with a parent from another state who he and other people from his church got together and they built $1 million home for 6 people to live in, and then the state refused to allow them to open because the house was not part of a certified program. So just talk to the state and find out if they're going to approve it or not. When we first proposed Heritage Christian, we were denied by New York State. We were told the area has enough service providers, go to them. We didn't. And so 40 years later, we have a really great history and tradition, and we are certified by New York State for what we do. We also have non-certified sites, but that's a different story. But just make a quick phone call to your state and see if they're going to support what it is you want to do.
Thank you for sharing that. That would be a hard lesson to learn, wouldn't it? Thank you. Gail.
I'm going to just share things I know from people who've done similar things, not just some of those families related to STAR's ministry at College Church, which created their own separate nonprofit entity, but also someone I know who, along with her husband, just went out and bought a house and worked with those that do in building services, just chosen agency, is what I've seen from the stories that they have shared is, if you know a group of parents that are thinking about starting a residential situation, strongly recommend that they network and ask, even outside their state where the rules may be different for the sake of ideas, but that they carefully research what the ground rules are in their state and their location. The couple that bought a home with the idea of when their 2 sons reached adulthood would be able to live there along with some others, did some research on a number of nearby towns and ended up going into an unincorporated area of one suburb because that was easier than dealing with incorporated areas and the local municipalities. So there's all sorts of little details to check into. The more work you do on the front end before you even start fundraising or putting things together, the happier I think those folks will be. I know one thing that popped up with STARS, and this is not revealing any deep details because I believe they would share this with anyone, as they were looking at the families within their circle of who would like to, try this out. One question that came up here in Illinois is, Do any of these people take medication? Yes or no? Do any of these people who take medication, can they self-administer? Can they open their own jar? Can they remember to take it on time? If not, you're a different category and you need someone who perhaps is an RN to stop by on a daily basis or a weekly basis. And they were very shocked pretty far into the process to find out that that was going to be an issue.
That's a really good specific example of some of the questions that maybe people hadn't even thought about. So I love the idea that and it's probably parents, but as people from your churches are thinking about this kind of thing, and like, could they, design, fundraise, develop this thing, the importance of networking, both within your geographic area and outside. Yeah, so I would love to help the people that I know that are thinking about doing this. I would love to help connect them to like success stories around the country. People that have they went through that process and have figured out some of these questions that need to be asked and things that need to be considered. So personally, if you know of places that you would recommend, send them my way. Anybody else?
Are you familiar, Beth, with what the Cook family, Marie with Nathaniel's Hope?
Yeah,
what
I
they're
was
doing?
really hoping one of them would be on. Molly, would you be able to represent them?
Well, I cannot represent them. That's impossible. But they're the Hope Town, is that what you're referring to?
Yes. Yeah.
So the Cooks,
Nathaniel's Hope. I mean, it's
Nathaniel's Hope,
Cooks
right?
and Nathaniel's, yeah.
Right. One of their new initiatives, and it is just at the ground level. So it's in design form, but they bought a piece of property, and this is big, huge. Like when you think of like, it's huge. So I'm not suggesting this as a model for everybody, because this is a huge undertaking, but pieces of it could be, like it's a great model. But they bought this big piece of property in the greater Orlando area where they live, and they are going to develop it. It will have housing for special needs people, but it's going to be a self-sustaining type property that will have like a convention center, some small like family-friendly recreation, like perhaps putt-putt or ice cream shop, or a wide range of things to do, so that it will bring in the public, like a petting zoo maybe. It will bring in the public who will pay for these things, but then these special needs people will help be employed, will be employed there. And it's kind of a cocoon community that is also a business. And so it's not just residential. It's really like building a small tourist town almost, but they want it to be very affordable and reachable for the average family, where in that area, you can spend a lot of money on recreation. This would be much more everyday type expense. Anyway, it's just a cool model, and it's much more, that's high level, very high level, but you can go on. I know they have it. Yeah, it's a beautiful, and it's a very big partnership. There's a lot of people coming together to make it happen, but yeah, it's exciting.
Huge God thing. I mean, this is going to be amazing. And yeah, so you'll be hearing more about Hope Town as it progresses, but yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, they are amazing.
Yeah. They are. All right, well, let's end there, because that's like a really cool thing to look forward to. But I really appreciate all the perspectives that everybody brought today. We have parents and caregivers here. We have ministry leaders, and I love that everybody has been so open with sharing what they're dealing with, the ideas, potential problems we need to look out for. But I just encourage you to think about what's one thing maybe that your church can do to kind of assist with this pain point for families. And you know, by all means, reach out to Key Ministry if you want to share what you're going to do, or if you have questions or ideas. We're here to you know, to talk through that with you. So you can always go to keyministry.org and click on our Contact Us button, and we'll get back in touch with you. So also check out togetherforchoice.org. So Diane just attended a presentation by Ashley Kim Weiss, National Coordinator. They consult, advise families on creating housing options. So thank you, Diane, for sharing that. That looks like a good, we'll have to check out that resource. All right, thanks everybody. We will get this recording up there on Key Ministry website. You can record all of these so you can check them out, and we will see you next month. Thank you, everybody.